The first rule is stand up straight with your shoulders back. The best way to present yourself is to stand up forthrightly and to stretch out, and to occupy some space. You make yourself sort of vulnerable by doing that because you open up the front of your body, right? But it's a sign of confidence. And that way people are most likely to give you the benefit of the doubt. And that's a good way to start regulating your mood. But not only does it directly regulate your mood to stand up, but also because if you straighten up and you present yourself in that manner, then other people are more likely to take you seriously. And that means they'll start treating you as if you're a number 1 lobster instead of a number 10 lobster. And that's another way that you can at least give yourself the bloody benefit of the doubt, right? Rule number 2 is treat yourself like you're someone that you care about. Why the hell should you take care of something as sorry and wretched as you are? First of all, yes, you're pretty useless and terrible, but so is everyone else, and that's actually an existential problem, right? And what I mean by that, it's a problem that every human being has always had and always will. So it's not just you, it's a universal problem. And that there's an answer to that, and one of them is to, what does it say? Love the sinner but hate the sin. It's something like that, is that despite the fact that you're not all that you could be, the proper attitude to have towards yourself is the attitude that you would have towards someone that you genuinely cared for. And that it's incumbent on you to act as if you genuinely care for yourself, just like you would act towards someone that you actually cared about, some other person. And so it's a reversal in some sense of the golden rule, right? And the next rule is make friends with people who want the best for you. Like you have an ethical responsibility to take care of yourself, you have an ethical responsibility to surround yourself with people who have the courage and faith and wisdom to wish you well when you've done something good and to stop you when you're doing something destructive. And if your friends aren't like that, then they're not your friends. And maintaining your friendships with them might not even be in their interest. Number 4 is compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. There is inequality. What that means is there's always going to be people around that are better at something than you are. And that's a problem, because you can get jealous and you can get bitter and you can get resentful, and worse, you can get hopeless. You have to be careful who you compare yourself to. Now, you can't just not compare yourself to successful people, right? Because then you don't have anything to aim at. You need a goal, but we don't want to let your distance from the goal crush you. So you got to set up a goal, and then you got to break the goal down into parts so that you can move towards it, and you have a fairly high likelihood of doing it. Chapter 5 is the one that I thought I would get in the most trouble for writing, So, and it's called, do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. You have a natural affinity for children, and even more, maybe a more powerful natural affinity for your own children, so that's a good start. But you don't want to set them up as an enemy against you. You don't want to allow them to engage in the kind of hierarchical challenge that makes you irritable and resentful. That's not a good idea. And if the things they do make you dislike them, the probability that they will make other people dislike them is extraordinarily high. And so you can consult your own irritability. And you can say, look, kid, I'm not in a very good mood. And I'm likely to be unreasonable, so it'd be best if you'd go in your room and play for a while. It's like, I like you, man, you're a great kid, but like, get the hell out of here for a while. You need to know what sort of monster you are if you're going to be a good parent. And if you think, oh, I'm not a monster, it's like, oh, yes, you are. You're just an unbelievably unconscious monster, and that's actually the worst kind. And chapter 6 is about solve what you can about yourself first before you can set your family straight, and before you should dare to try to set the world straight. And the question is, well, have I really done everything I possibly could to set my life straight? Because maybe I shouldn't be judging its quality, or the quality of life itself, or being itself, for that matter, if I haven't done everything I possibly could to set my life straight. Try not doing the things you know you shouldn't do. Try not saying the things you know to be false. And just watch what happens. Here's another rule. Pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. You're engaged in something and a nihilistic thought comes out, well, what's the point of this, given, how unbearable the world is in the current political situation and the fact that we're inhabiting some ball of dust on the edge of some fringe part of the cosmos and that everything's dead and material. It's like, get thee behind me, Satan, right? Really, it's not a mark of wisdom. It's not a mark of wisdom to let nihilistic, demonic voices steal your joie de vivre. That is not a mark of wisdom. And you might object, well, at least it's not naive. It's like, yeah, cynicism might be preferable to naivety, but it doesn't hold a candle to wisdom. And that's worth knowing too. Because once you've been hurt and you're cynical, there's no going back to naive. But there's no point in staying at cynical. And there are degrees of courage way beyond cynicism. And some of that is the regaining of the faith you had as a child despite your current level of wisdom. And that's something to strive for, right? That's a moral attainment. That's not a burying your head back in the sand. Quite the contrary. Rule 8 is tell the truth, or at least don't lie. To tell the truth implies that you know the truth. And you don't know the truth because you're too ignorant to know the truth. And so you get by with a pretty shallow understanding of most things. And so you can't really tell the truth, but I think you can not lie. It's not a good idea to say things that you know not to be true. You have to be very careful with what you say and what you write, but you don't want to speak things that you believe to be untrue, and you certainly don't want to write them because that changes you, and it changes you in the direction of the deception that you're undertaking while you do the speaking or the writing. And you might think, nah, I can write whatever I want and I can just leave it be, but that's not true. And the reason for that, in part, is because your knowledge is shallow. And so if you take rather shallow knowledge and then you write something detailed that's false, you end up convincing yourself in all sorts of ways that you don't even notice that what you wrote that was a lie was true. And then you're stuck with that. And you know it's a bad idea because you kind of know, like everybody knows, that if you want to get through the world, if you want to get from point A to point B, if you want to get to wherever you're going, it'd be good to have a map. And it'd probably be good to have a map that isn't full of holes and errors, because otherwise you're not going to get to where you're going. You might not even know where you are to begin with. And that seems like a bad plan if you're going to undertake a journey, and you are going to undertake a journey because your life is a journey. So, oh yes, chapter 9 is assume that the person you are listening to might know something you don't. This is a chapter about conversation and about the different forms conversation takes. And it's a chapter about humility, and it's a chapter about listening. And the humility element is, well, do you want to be right, or do you want to be learning? And it's deeper than that. It's, do you want to be the tyrannical king who's already got everything figured out? Or do you want to be the continually transforming hero, or fool for that matter, who's getting better all the time? And that's actually a choice, you know. It's a deep choice, and it's better to be the self-transforming fool who's humble enough to make friends with what he or she doesn't know and to listen when people talk.
I like this one, and I mean, this is very clearly what you do. Be precise in your speech.
It's like, well, why be literate? Well, do you want to be competent and dangerous, or do you want to be vague and useless? Because those are your options, and I don't care what your job is. It doesn't matter what you end up doing. You know, if you're a plumber and you're articulate, you can negotiate with your clients. You can introduce your coworkers. You can make a case for your employees. You can advertise your services. You can think through your problems. You're firing on all cylinders. Okay, so that's the case for being articulate. And what's the alternative? You want to be inarticulate? You want to say and like and and pause and stumble and be unable to formulate a strategy, be unable to elucidate a vision, be unable to compel and convince other people, to entice them with your articulated vision of what might be? You want the opposite of that? Why would you want that? It's preposterous. It's beyond foolish.
Rule number 11, do not bother children when they are skateboarding.
That's an
essay about masculinity, mostly. You know, I used to watch kids skateboard on St. George Street. And anyways, these kids we had these long bar hand railings going down some shallow stairs, but a fairly good flight of them, and they would board slide down these rails. And they didn't have much protective gear on, and you know, and eventually the university put up things to stop them, you know, from doing this. I liked watching those kids. I like watching skateboarders do those crazy things because they're trying to become competent. Like, and they're facing danger. They don't want the damn protective gear. Like, sometimes it's just stupidity. It's like, wear a damn helmet, you know? But sometimes it's not. It's like, no, I don't want to wear a helmet. I want to expose myself to this danger. It's not that I'm stupid. Maybe it is. You know, I'm just being careless.
Right.
But maybe it's not. It's like, no, I'm facing the danger. I'm trying to master it. And the kids are often shooed away. It's like, wait a sec. They're practicing being courageous. They're practicing mastering something in the face of danger.
Final rule. It's called pet a cat when you encounter one on the street. And it's the most personal. But the idea is that, you know, you have to be alert when you're suffering. You have to be alert to the beauty in life, the unexpected beauty in life. And that's kind of what I was trying to get across with the idea of the cat. There's this cat that lives across the street from us called Ginger, and Ginger's a Siamese cat. And cats really aren't domesticated, technically speaking. They're still wild animals, but they kind of like people. God only knows why, but they do, you know. And so Ginger will come wandering over, and our dog looks at her, but they're friends, and she rolls over on his back, and Seiko used to, you know, nose her a bit. And then she'd kind of mosey over and let you pet her if she was feeling like it that day. And, you know, you have to look for that little bit of sparkling crystal in the darkness when things are bad. You have to look and see where things are still beautiful and where there's still something that's sustaining. And, you know, you narrow your time frame and you be grateful for what you have, and that can get you through some very dark times. And maybe even successfully if you're lucky. But even if unsuccessfully, then maybe it's only tragic and not absolute hell.